She didn't come into his life by accident. Every step she took toward him was carefully planned, fueled by years of anger, loss, and unanswered questions. To the world, he was a respected man, powerful, calm, admired for his success and influence. But to her, he was the reason her world had burned down. The night her family lost everything, her father's reputation destroyed, her home taken away, her mother broken by shame, his name had been whispered like a curse. No proof, no justice, only rumors that always led back to him. That was enough for her. Revenge didn't need certainty, it only needed belief. So she rebuilt herself in silence, turning pain into discipline, tears into strategy. When she finally stood in front of him for the first time, posing as someone harmless, someone ordinary, her heart pounded, not with fear, but with satisfaction. He looked nothing like the monster she had imagined. His voice was steady, his eyes unreadable, almost kind, and that unsettled her more than cruelty ever could. Still, she reminded herself why she was there. She smiled when she wanted to scream, she listened when she wanted to accuse. Slowly, deliberately, she began inserting herself into his world, gaining his trust, learning his weaknesses, documenting every move that could one day destroy him the way he had destroyed her. But fate has a cruel sense of irony. The closer she got, the more cracks appeared in the story she had believed for years. Small moments disturbed her certainty, his quiet generosity, his refusal to step on others to rise higher, the way guilt sometimes flickered across his face when her family was mentioned, as if he carried regrets of his own. She ignored those signs, convincing herself they were distractions. Revenge demanded blindness. What she didn't know, what would change everything, was that the man she was preparing to ruin had already noticed her pain, had already begun protecting her in ways she couldn't see, and that the truth behind her tragedy was far darker and far more dangerous than either of them imagined. As days turned into weeks, her plan moved forward with quiet precision. She stayed close to him, close enough to hear the rhythm of his life, close enough to notice the loneliness that followed him, even in crowded rooms. He trusted her faster than she expected, not because he was careless, but because there was something in her eyes he recognized, the look of someone who had survived pain and learned to stand anyway. That recognition unsettled her. She had prepared herself to face arrogance, cruelty, indifference, but not understanding. Still, she pushed ahead. She gathered documents, overheard late-night phone calls, memorized names and timelines, slowly stitching together a narrative that would expose him publicly and destroy everything he had built. Yet every piece of evidence felt incomplete, like fragments of a puzzle that refused to form a clear picture. Meanwhile, his actions began to contradict the villain she believed him to be. When a scandal threatened to crush a junior employee, he took the blame to protect them. When she fell ill from exhaustion, he noticed immediately, quietly rearranging his schedule to make sure she was cared for, without ever making it feel like a favor. These moments gnawed at her resolve. At night, doubt crept in, whispering questions she didn't want to answer. What if she was wrong? What if she had chosen the wrong enemy? But the memory of her family's suffering always pulled her back. She reminded herself that kindness could be a mask, that powerful men often hid their darkest sins behind generosity. What she didn't realize was that while she was spying on him, someone else had begun watching her. Someone from his past, someone who knew the real story of what happened to her family, and someone who would do anything to make sure that truth never came out. The first crack in her carefully built plan appeared the night everything went wrong. She had stayed late in his office, pretending to organize files while secretly copying a set of encrypted emails she believed would finally expose him. Her heart raced as the progress bar crawled across the screen, each second feeling louder than the last. But before the transfer could finish, the lights flickered and the door opened. He stood there, silent, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She braced herself for anger, for accusations, for the cold threat of power being used against her. Instead, he simply closed the door behind him and asked, in a low, steady voice, if she was okay. The question shattered her defenses. She fumbled for an excuse, her hands shaking, but he didn't press her. He turned away, giving her space, and told her to go home, that whatever she was working on could wait until morning. That mercy confused her more than any confrontation could have. From that moment on, everything changed. She noticed the subtle shift in how he looked at her, not with suspicion, but with concern, as if he sensed a storm inside her she couldn't control. At the same time, the danger around her began to surface. Anonymous messages started appearing on her phone, warnings to stop digging, reminders of things only someone close to her past could know. Fear followed her like a shadow, tightening its grip. When she finally admitted she was being threatened, she expected him to distance himself. Instead, he stepped closer. Without asking for explanations, he arranged security, altered her routine, and placed himself between her and whatever was coming. It was in those moments, watching him quietly choose her safety over his own comfort, that her certainty began to collapse. The man she was trying to ruin was now the only one protecting her, and the realization terrified her more than any threat ever could. The night she finally understood the depth of his protection was the same night her plan nearly cost her life. She had insisted on leaving the building alone, unwilling to appear weak or suspicious, but he followed at a distance she didn't notice, until the sound of hurried footsteps echoed behind her in the empty parking garage. Everything happened in seconds. A hand grabbed her arm, a voice hissed her name, and fear stole her breath. Before she could scream, he was there, pulling her free and placing himself between her and the attacker with a calm, controlled fury that left no room for doubt. The man fled, but the danger didn't. As he drove her away, his hands steady on the wheel, she realized he had known this might happen. He admitted he'd been tracking the threats quietly, waiting for proof, refusing to let her be alone until he was certain she was safe. In the days that followed, guilt settled heavy in her chest. The evidence she'd gathered to destroy him sat untouched, its weight unbearable now that she'd seen the truth of his character. He never asked why she'd been searching for his secrets. He never demanded loyalty or explanations. Instead, he focused on rebuilding her sense of safety, moving her to a secure place, checking in on her with gentle concern, listening when she spoke and respecting her silence when she couldn't. Slowly, trust replaced fear, and with it came something far more dangerous. She began to see the loneliness he hid behind responsibility, the quiet exhaustion of a man who carried everyone else's burdens without complaint. And somewhere between late-night conversations and unspoken understanding, her mission dissolved. She wasn't trying to ruin his life anymore. She was trying to understand how she could ever make up for nearly destroying the one person who had chosen to save hers. The truth came out on a quiet night neither of them expected to remember. The city outside was hushed by rain, the kind that softened edges and made confessions feel inevitable. She stood across from him, her hands clenched, the words trembling at the back of her throat until they finally broke free. She told him everything about the lies she had believed, the revenge she had planned, the evidence she had collected to tear his world apart. Each sentence felt like a betrayal spoken aloud. She waited for the anger, the disappointment, the moment he would step back and shut her out. But he didn't. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable, the weight of her confession settling between them. When she finished, tears streaking her face, he finally spoke, not with fury, but with a quiet sadness that hurt far more. He admitted he had suspected from the beginning that she was hiding something, yet he chose to trust her anyway, believing people were more than their worst intentions. What followed was not forgiveness given easily, but something deeper and more fragile. He told her she had hurt him, that trust once broken could never return unchanged, but he also told her that saving her had never been a mistake. In that moment, she realized love was not the dramatic rescue she'd imagined in stories, but the choice to stay when walking away would be easier. She offered to leave, to disappear from his life so he could protect what he'd built. He refused, not out of pride or possession, but because he believed growth came from facing the truth together. Standing there, drenched in regret and hope, she understood the final cruelty of her original plan. In trying to ruin him, she had found the only man who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. Time passed, and the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble, not with force, but with quiet understanding. She no longer saw him as the man she needed to ruin, but as the one who had saved her when she had refused to save herself. Every act of kindness, every unspoken protection had shifted the balance between them, turning suspicion into respect, and respect into something more profound, something neither of them had anticipated but both had been too stubborn to admit. When she finally faced the reality of her feelings, it was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She had tried to destroy him, but in doing so, she had discovered a truth far more powerful. Love could heal even the deepest betrayals, and trust could be rebuilt when guided by patience and courage. The danger around them eventually faded, leaving them in a fragile peace that felt earned, not given. Standing together, they realized their connection was forged not from ease or convenience, but from the fire of conflict, the weight of mistakes, and the vulnerability they had shown to each other. The life she had wanted to protect through revenge had led her straight into his care, and the life he had chosen to protect her had revealed that love was more than attraction. It was commitment, sacrifice, and unwavering support. In the quiet aftermath, she smiled at him, a mixture of relief and affection flooding her chest, and he returned it with a gentle nod, eyes reflecting all the unspoken words they had yet to share. Their story had begun in deception and anger, but it ended in something far stronger, a partnership built on honesty, respect, and a love that neither of them could have predicted, but both would choose every day for the rest of their lives.